Okay. I see Nicole's here, Tony's here. Jeff is out today, so Mike will be our chair. I have Mike and Gina. I do not see Leland. Is Leland here? What about Anna? Or anybody from Thea? Nope. Right, I see we have Matthew with the school board. I do not see anybody from Temple Terrace. We have Chris with BARDA. And then we have Griselle with the health department. With that, we do have a quorum, so we can go ahead and get started. Let me see. Pull up the agenda and share my screen on it. All right, you can go ahead and start, Mike.
Okay, so the first item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak today at the meeting? Anyone that wishes to speak? One more chance. Okay, I guess seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is approval of the minutes from the September meeting. Did everyone have a chance to review the minutes? And if so, would anyone like to propose a motion?
This is Gina. I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
All right.
All right, second.
Who was the second?
This is Jay Collins. I second it since I heard somebody else with the motion as I was saying it as well.
All right. Thank you, Jay. So we have a motion by Gina to approve the minutes and a second by Jay. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, hearing none, motion passes. Next, we'll move, we have no regular items this month, so other than the minutes, so we'll move to status reports. First item on the status reports is the review of last year's legislative positions and suggested new ones. And I guess, is Beth doing that one, I'm assuming?
Hey, I am here.
Hey, Beth.
How is everybody today?
We're good.
Good. So this is just an opportunity to take a look at the legislative positions that the MPO has taken in recent years and see if we would like to suggest any changes to those or bring forward any new positions for the board to consider. So you should have in your agenda packet some attachments, including a letter to Senator Roussan, who was the chairman of our legislative delegation last year. And some of the points that we brought up at that time were opposing legislation that restricts citizen participation in key decisions, such as by eliminating seats on our board or by restricting the use of voter-approved Charter County transportation surtax proceeds to a narrow set of eligible expenditures. Those were some ideas that had been floated in previous years. It seems like every year there is some movement in the legislature to that would affect home rule decisions, kind of preempt local decision making, including in the ability for our voters to make their own decisions about raising funds and making investments in our transportation system. So my suggestion is that we should continue to keep that on our radar screen. We also had a bullet point about traffic safety, and some suggestions in previous years were about allowing officers to enforce cell phone use restrictions, increasing penalties for injuring pedestrians, increasing penalties for repeat drag racing. Regulation of motorized scooters has been taken up. So I'm looking to you all for your advice about whether there is something that we need to say this year about regulation of motorized scooters. We also supported raising standards for school hazardous walking conditions previously, and urged the state to continue to share the cost burden of the required school bus service. So I think a lot of that is probably worth continuing to keep in front of us. We dug in quite a bit this past year on the issue of the rapid flashing beacons. You may remember there was a bill that would have required removal of those in a lot of circumstances. That bill was scaled back, but we hear that it's probably going to get reintroduced this year. So we'll probably have to continue to mount an effort if we want to have RFBs as one of the tools in our toolbox. Let's see. There's also a letter in your agenda packet that was from our MPO in concert with a few other urbanized area MPOs, asking for greater flexibility in the use of toll revenue to provide that for transit service. That's something that our TMA leadership group is taking a broader position about transit funding this year. And so that's the last attachment that you have in your agenda packet. So over the last few months, we've been doing some coordination with TBARTA, with the transit agencies, and with the Pasco and Pinellas MPOs to talk about earmarks as they affect the state budget and funding available for transit in particular. And so this is in the context of a challenge that we have overall, which is that there's a limited pot of funding to address transportation needs, right? It's either funding that your local agency has available to it through local sources, or you're looking for state or federal dollars, and a lot of those state or federal dollars flow through Tallahassee to our DOT district office and are programmed in the work program. And there isn't any magic extra money that appears when there is an earmark in our state legislative budget. Instead, what happens is that our local district office is then required to use the limited amount of money that it has and allocate that to this earmark. And the earmarks are generally for the current fiscal year, which tends to be very challenging because then there isn't an opportunity to necessarily juggle things around in the 5-year work program to try to accommodate that. It has to be accommodated in this fiscal year, which means it has a lot of potential to bump some other project that probably has come up through our prioritization process that we coordinate with you all. And we've gotten, as you know, we look at setting priorities for 5 years out. We share those priorities with the District 7 office. The District 7 office does their darndest to attach dollars to the high priority projects. They get into the work program, and then eventually we get closer and closer to that year, and then those funds can be distributed to you all through an agreement. When there is an earmark, that preempts that whole process. So then all of a sudden in the current fiscal year, instead of the project that you've been waiting 5 years for to get funded, having the dollars attached to it, now all of a sudden the earmark has the dollars attached to it. So this came up this past year in the context of 2 earmarks that went to TBARTA. One of them bumped funding that was allocated to HART for its maintenance facility. It obviously was not enough money to rebuild the entire maintenance facility, but there are a lot of incremental things that can be done for the HART maintenance facility. So those dollars got reallocated to TBARDA for operations. And then there was another earmark for TBARDA that apparently TBARDA didn't even ask for, that was identified for innovative transit, and wound up being spent on a study of innovative transit strategies. Well, that money got taken out of a project for PSTA to improve the 100X bus service that connects St. Pete to Tampa. So, you know, was or was not PSTA ready to move forward with that in the current budget year? If they hadn't been, those dollars would have gotten spent on something similar for some of our longer distance express bus routes. So all of this led to a lot of discussion at the regional level, at the TMA in particular, about needing to come together on our priorities and singing off the same song sheet. And so we've drafted this position statement on transit funding to at least start the conversation about budget earmarks. But honestly, this is true of all earmarks. So this is going to be true of any earmarks that any of our local governments go to Tallahassee and request. They will very likely bump something else that you all have been waiting for. So first bullet point is state legislative earmarks, unless they're specifically funded through state general revenue, do not result in new funding for transit. The chances of something getting funded through state general revenue this year are a lot lower than they were in previous years because of the budget situation with COVID. So, you know, getting a legislative earmark funded through general revenue for a transportation project is a long shot from what we're hearing. And so the earmarks shift funds that can be spent on transit away from the essential services that are a high priority to the transit agencies. This aggravates existing shortfalls in transit funding. This is a challenge for our economy. And so we're looking at position suggestions with this. So TBARDA has agreed to include in its legislative ask this year, they are still continuing to ask for $1.5 million in an earmark of some kind, but they are asking that that come from state general revenue. And if it can't come from state general revenue, that it should come from DOT's budget statewide off the top before the budget gets divvied up to the district offices. We're also asking at the TMA level for greater flexibility in the use of the Transportation Trust Fund dollars. So making transit an eligible and a prioritized use of the funding that's available for the SIS, the Strategic Intermodal System. And then the other thing that we're really highlighting this year is providing local governments more flexibility in being able to raise and invest local dollars. So this is again that position statement about preempting local decision making, and that we would ask the legislature to allow local communities to make their own decisions about raising money and investing in the infrastructure that each community deems critically important. So that's where we are. We've talked with BPAC about these positions. They've asked us to take a look at the Florida Bicycling Association legislative platform, where there's a push this year on the move over law. So that's, you know, directing that motorists need to move farther over to avoid a bicyclist. So we're getting that language from FBA. And I think that is what I've got so far on ideas for our legislative platform this year. So open to hearing from you all.
Hey, Beth, it's Gina. I just think that your stance on the earmarks is extremely helpful right now. I think that even given the current budget situation where we're not even sure what the impacts to the current trust fund is. I know many of us on this call are waiting to hear what even happened with this year's 5-year priorities as the district moves forward. And I think that as we all work to be good partners with FDOT, we should also respect their process, and that when we do these earmarks, that's making challenges for the priorities that are also in the district. And it will be difficult, a general revenue with the trust fund, with everything for the next few years. And I think that your advice is extremely important right now, that we need to go through the process, and that these earmarks, even when there is funding available, are hurtful. But especially now when so many of us on this meeting have been working so hard for all of these priorities and aren't sure what that outcome will even be. And, you know, unfortunately too, if a lot of these do get vetoed as well when they're outside of the process, and those funds are not reverted back to the district, they are just taken away from those projects to never be returned. So when we also do that, in some cases in the past, we've been giving up money in its entirety because of these earmarks. So I think that that's very good advice, and I hope that hopefully we can all move through that process through the regular order.
Thanks, Gina.
Hey, Beth.
Well, I sure would. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Hey, Beth, this is Nicole. So thanks for giving us that presentation. I think it's very important that our earmarks stay with the projects that we've actually designated them for. I did have a question for you about the scooters. So what was the plan for the scooters?
Yeah. I'm not sure that I'm the best spokesperson for that. So I think they are allowed on roads, right? I'm hoping that somebody else on the TAC who's more familiar with the final regulation on scooters can talk about this.
Yeah, I believe they are. But anyone can chime in on that. And so that was supposed to remain as is that correct?
I'm actually looking for feedback from you all. You know, from the local governments in particular had brought up this issue previously about the regulation of motorized scooters, and that they wanted the ability to regulate them appropriately for safety. And so we had supported that position in the past. You know, so I'm looking for feedback from you all about whether that is still something that we need to ask for this year.
Okay.
This is Danny. I'll talk to Calvin Thornton about that. He's our micromobility engineer, but I'm not sure about the answer.
Okay. Okay, well, we have a little bit of time before this gets finalized. So if you all can, you know, send me a follow-up email about where your organization is. And, you know, if you have any legislative positions that you can share, I would sure appreciate that.
Beth, this is Mike, before we're done with this. Have we taken the position, and I didn't see it, maybe you mentioned it and I just missed it, but that just particularly with the budget that we're going to be in this year and at the legislature, just taking the position about not taking money out of the trust fund in general? Because I know that's always a fight DOT fights.
Right.
And it's sort of along the lines of what we've been talking about, but it's maybe a little bit different approach to that.
That's a good point. We should probably reiterate that statement, not rating the Transportation Trust Fund. Because you're right. I mean, that's more often what happens. It's not usually
That's
that
fine.
there's some extra money out of the general fund that gets allocated to transportation. Usually transportation money gets shifted the other way. So.
Right, and it's something that's, you know, DOT tries to fight every single year, but and you know, when times are good, maybe it's not as big of an issue, but it just seems like this year they might be looking for money.
Yeah, good point. I see that Joshua put in the chat that scooters have the same rights and duties as a rider of a bicycle in Florida. Thank you, Joshua.
Thank you. And just one last, back to the earmarks, you know, that can be a very political thing. And just so you know, as staff, we don't always control what gets requested. And I'll leave it at that.
Sure. Sure. Well, and that's why I'm trying to elevate this conversation, you know, so that more of our elected decision makers are aware that this is a zero-sum game.
Yeah, and I can tell you from our perspective, when our elected officials want to do earmarks and things like that, we always tell them that, you know, you realize this isn't more money coming to us. It just is robbing Peter to pay Paul is really what it is. And, you know,
Yeah.
sometimes that falls on deaf ears. And
Yeah, I've been there too.
yeah, so I know you have. We all have. But okay. Thank you, Beth. Anybody else real quickly before we move on to the next item? Okay, I think that's it, Beth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is the Fowler Avenue Multimodal Study. And Ken Spitz from DOT will be speaking to that. Ken?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Hope y'all can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Let's go ahead and get started with this. So I'm talking to you today about the, excuse me, there we go. I'm talking to you today about we call it the University Avenue Multimodal Feasibility Study, but it is primarily focused on Fowler Avenue. Am I running it, Sarah, or are you running it? Okay. So this is the result. Today I'm going to share with you the results of about a 1.5-year study that we did with Kimley Horn Associates. And we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to do an overview and then we'll get into more of the details. So the key corridor needs that we found during this study is obviously safety, transit flexibility, and intersection efficiency. So we understand that in the Fowler corridor, we have quite a bit of issues with pedestrians, bicyclists, and the interactions that they have with vehicles. We also understand that we have lighting needs in this corridor, both low level and high level lighting. We also want to reduce the exposure that cyclists have to the high speed traffic. Parts of Fowler Avenue are currently at 55 or 50 miles an hour. Those tend to be more towards the east over by I-75, but it's 45 in the rest of the corridor. By the way, the corridor that we studied goes from I-75 to I-275. So we also want to have lower travel speeds just because that also promotes safety, and especially in the areas where we have interaction with pedestrian and cyclist activity. We also have to be concerned about transit flexibility. As you'll see in an upcoming slide, a particular segment of Fowler Avenue is proposed by HART for its BRT, Bus Rapid Transit plan. And there's also the possibility in the future that that could be upgraded to an LRT, light rail transit. So we want to be able to make sure that whatever we do with that envelope, that's how we think about it, between the right-of-way lines on Fowler Avenue, that we're able to accommodate whatever might be coming forward also from transit. And we also have to be aware that this area, the university area, is going to see about 3 million square feet new mixed use over the next 10 to 15 years. Also, 3,000 new residences are already approved. So that's also going to drive up some future volume. Obviously, we hope transit and other modes take a good chunk of that, but for the time being, there will be continued automobile use. So we're also, we'll be looking in the next stage at the innovative intersection designs where feasible. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. There we go. So as was just mentioned, as Beth was talking about, and you guys all heard about the state funding, we do look at things in sort of 5-year buckets. So for this project, we also have to do that. So we looked at it in terms of short-term, medium-term, and long-term, as you can see here. There's a lot of words on here, but what it basically says is we can do many things in parallel. So while we're looking at doing some minor construction during short-term actions, we can be looking at completing the required planning and environmental approval process for the next phase, for medium term, and we can be acquiring right-of-way for that. And as we move into medium term, we can be looking for long term. So the idea here is to keep this in continuous motion, I guess I would say, and not just do it in a linear fashion. So we'll go to the next slide. I think you have to click it one more time. There we go. So within the corridor, these are the 4 or 5 intersections that we have for short-term actions for intersection improvements. As you can see, those are Nebraska, 12th, 19th, 22nd Street, and then at 56th Street. If you hit the button next. We're also looking at doing leading pedestrian intervals. So to improve the signal for pedestrians, so they have a chance, what it does is it provides a walk signal a few seconds, usually 3 or 4 seconds ahead of the green. So what happens is then the pedestrians get a chance to get further off the curb out where where drivers can see them, and it gives them more of a protection when they're in the crosswalk. So we're looking at those, as you can see, at Nebraska, Bruce B. Downs, McKinley, 50th Street and 56th Street. And then on the next slide, we are looking especially towards the east end of the corridor. We have several places where the intersections are sort of incomplete. Maybe just 1 or 2 legs has a crosswalk that's actually painted on the pavement, and we want to go ahead and make those across all legs. So these actions we see as happening within the next few years. So this is the proposed implementation schedule. I think if you click, there's a couple of arrows or an arrow that comes up. Nope, I guess not. Okay, go back. So this gives the schedule over the next 5 years for implementation and shows again where these proposed improvements are. What's down here in the lower right corner gives you an idea of fiscal year. Our fiscal year is July to June, so we are already in fiscal year 21. So some of these projects, some of the short-term improvements will actually be design build. So we've already got some initial designs done for those. And then in 22, fiscal year 22 is actually when they would be constructed. The medium and long-term actions would fall more towards the bottom of that chart in the lower right. And you'll see a gray area which says PD&E, that's project development and environmental review, and then design. So those will follow a little longer, and that's part of that sort of overlapping schedule that I mentioned at the beginning. So you can see we've got PD&E and design and then construction on those later in the 5-year cycle. But as you can see, we want to try to get all of this done within these 5 years. Okay, we'll move forward. So let's talk a little bit about the conceptual designs that we're looking for on Fowler Avenue. These fell basically into 3 categories: bat lane, frontage lane, and median transit way. Now you see the asterisk up there at the top, and then at the bottom it says these concepts will be analyzed in the PD&E study and others may be developed. These are the 3 that we came up with as part of the planning study. PD&E goes into more detail. It's more of an engineering look as opposed to a planning look. So this is when you'll get more into where the right-of-way needs are, exactly where the curb lines and the utilities and that kind of thing, whether things might need to be moved, whether drainage will be impacted. So there may be other conceptual designs that come up. There may be tweaks to the ones I'm about to show you. So the bat lane is a business access and transit lane. And what it is it's a lane that's colored red, and it's bus priority, but you can make right turns to through adjacent driveways or streets from that lane. This is what we call a minor to major construction. In some places, this would not require moving the curb line at all. In other places, it might require near intersections where we might have to change the curb lines a little bit. So that's why it's minor to major. But this is something that can definitely be done within that 5 to 10 year window. A frontage lane is an access lane that's separated from the main part of the roadway, but it also has a curbside bus only lane. That's also a minor to major construction. We'll see some drawings of these. And then the median transit way is kind of almost exactly what it sounds like. The BRT or LRT guideway would be in the center of the roadway. The stations would be separated from the vehicular traffic. that requires more moving of the curbs, utilities, and it's a major impact on the drainage. So that would be a long-term action. So let's move forward to the next slide. So this is a conceptual design of a business access and transit lane. And we've also provided a couple of examples up here in the upper right, San Francisco, California, and Minneapolis, Minnesota. What I'll point out on here is that we are looking at all three of these concepts to have 35-mile-an-hour posted speeds for the center lanes. You can see we have the red lanes, and although they do say bus only, you would be actually able to make right turns from the intersections. What I'll also point out here, though, is you'll see the green lanes, which are the bicycle. These are integrated with the transit stations, and so they would be behind it. You'll see it's different in other options coming forward. Although we're showing the stations like this, I would also point out the stations will primarily be located near or right at the intersections. So we didn't want to mess with all that and how to draw that. So in these concepts, you'll see it looks like it's maybe in the middle of nowhere, but these would be near the intersections. And as across the top there, we have all the icons. We've got all the modes. This was another key part of what we wanted to have facilities for all the modes that might use the corridor. Although I have to admit, we didn't look at e-scooters, so we'll figure those out. Go to the next slide. This is a frontage lane design, and again, we've got examples from Montgomery County and Maryland, and also in Queens, New York. In New York City, they do have quite a few of these in the boroughs of Queens and Kings. So there is some examples for us to go by with this in areas that are much more densely developed than Fowler Avenue. On this, what I'll point out is, again, you can see that the bus lanes are in red, the stations along the side there, but what we have is lanes in the center, which are, you could consider them through lanes or mainline lanes. Those would be 35 miles an hour. You see the gray area off to each side of those. Those would be the frontage lanes. We foresee a posted speed limit of 25 miles an hour on those. And you can tell that the green bike lanes then are moved to the other side there of the frontage lane. So they are not directly integrated with the transit. And then the gray to the outside, that would be access to, say, driveways or side streets. Okay, we'll go to the third option. And so this is what we mean by median transit way. And again, we have some examples here: Alexandria, Virginia, Quito, and Ecuador. The design that we foresee for Fowler is very much like the one that you're seeing here with Quito, where the station would be very close to the intersection. You can see where you've got integration with the sidewalks so that people can cross, pedestrians can get to the median and get to the transit. Here again, what you're seeing here is stations more in the center. We realize the drawback to this is then that means the pedestrians pretty much have to be at the intersection in order to get to the center. But your bike lanes are more to the outside of the main line. We also again see a posted speed limit here of about 35 miles an hour. We want to bring the posted speed down. And you can also see, we have all the modes here. We've got pedestrians and bike, vehicle and transit in various areas of the right-of-way. Okay, next slide. So we were working on our study at about the same time that Hart was working on their arterial BRT concept. So we just wanted to share this with you. It's not, so what we're showing is not very much different from what they had come up with the center. And again, they came up with 35-mile-an-hour speed also. But you can see here what's different is they've got their stations right in the center. On our one previous back, it could have been on either side, depending on which direction you were going. But they've also got, instead of separated bike lanes, they've got shared use paths off to the side. Where they're looking at is between Nebraska and Bruceby Downs, whereas we were obviously looking along the whole corridor. There is a possibility, as part of what we wanted to keep open for transit, in the future, there may be a regional rapid bus line that would run down I-75 South and then come across Fowler. So that's why we also included the entire corridor all the way over to 75. I think that's our last slide. So if you have any questions about any of the designs there or where we're headed with it, I'll be happy to take them if you have some time.
Okay, any question? Thank you. Any questions from the members?
Let me add one thing about the PD&E stage. That will be coming up within this fiscal year, probably we're thinking like March, April of 21. And there will be very rigorous and very vigorous public input. We will be going out to the community with this. We'll be asking for input. So there will be chances for the public also to have their say in this and other stakeholders.
Okay. I had a question. Again, this is Mike Williams. You mentioned you mentioned several intersections along Fowler that would be in the first 5 years, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Two of them were at 19th and 22nd Street. Yeah, that slide there.
Mm-hmm.
Did your consultant, or are you coordinating with the mall owner, because they're redeveloping that mall and they've got certain requirements at those intersections, right, and some of them are phased over a number of years and all that sort of thing?
Right. Yes, actually we have. We have some, we've already talked with them on some of the intersections. In fact, there's, I believe, a new one that's proposed at 15th, a new signal. So in all of those, we're looking at having full crosswalks. We're looking at having the curb radii reduced in order to shorten the space that pedestrians need, to cross the street. We're at the new ones, we probably would also be looking at the leading pedestrian interval, PED signaling that I mentioned. So yeah, as part of our design build, if those come along in the meantime, then yes, they would be included.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else have a question for Ken?
Awesome. Sounds like we got a green light.
Seeing none, I guess you're off the hook.
Awesome.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate the presentation.
Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity.
The next item on the agenda is Clear Guide, and I see Johnny's getting ready and queuing up. So Johnny, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Give me 1 sec to show my screen. Can you all hear me and see that presentation?
Yes.
All right, great. I apologize in advance because I know that a lot of you sit on other committees and you've already heard this presentation potentially for the 3rd time today. So at the end, if you have any new questions or if you just want to repeat previous questions, feel free. Anyway, Johnny Wong, Hillsborough MPO. I'm the project manager for a data and analytics platform project that had been roughly in the works for about 4 years. For 3 of those 4 years, it was just a vision. We hadn't actually done any implementation, but we had a lot of ideas for what we would like the data and analytics platform to become. And last November, we finally had a chance to kick it off. So today I'm going to go over a little bit of the backstory as to what led to the implementation of this project and what we hope to achieve with it in the future. So again, this project had been cooking for about 4 years before we finally implemented it last year. The impetus for this was a 2016 project that we participated in. It was an FHWA-led pilot study on data business plans. And the purpose of that study was to figure out how agencies, MPOs specifically, were acquiring, using, and managing transportation data. That study was mostly focused on aspects of data governance. So they asked us questions like, how are data being collected? What data exists within our county? How are the data being tracked? How are changes being documented? Who is responsible at the staff level? How is access being regulated? And so on and so forth. That was just a little bit of a summary. This slide shows a little bit more detailed rundown of what the questions were that the researchers were focused on. The most interesting findings out of these 6 bullet points on the screen came out of the second question, what data sets are being collected, the third, what are not being collected, and then the last bullet, which is what are we working toward. So those 3 questions focus on what is currently going on and what we hope to have accomplished in the future. So the second and third bullet points about what data sets do we have and what we don't have were answered by using a data and gap assessment or completing a data and gap assessment. We used a survey instrument to get that information. So we sent a survey out to all of the agencies that maintain some mobility data across Hillsborough County. And I think we actually expanded a little bit outside of the county as well to hit the TBRPC, the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, and our partners out in Pinellas and Pasco counties as well, and of course the district. The responses that we got revealed a lot of insights, and these are some of the insights that I think are most illuminating about what the landscape is across our county. The first one is that there's a ton of mobility data that's being collected. We identified no less than 50 unique mobility data sets, and we think that we may have even underestimated because the context that we had at each agency may not be familiar with all of the data sets that are being used in their agency. So this is really interesting finding because it shows how data intensive planning and operations have become. The second notable insight is that Hillsborough County is operating almost on the cutting edge. This study was done back in 2016, but even at that time, we had THEA's connected vehicle pilot study being, well, it was underway and they were collecting CV data. HART was at the time laying the groundwork to kick off its AV bus pilot program or pilot project on Marion Transitway. We were the first, we were one of the first, if not the first MPO to participate in the Waze Connected Citizens program. And we were just getting started using location-based service data that's captured from mobile devices. So we were really leading the way in a lot of respects in terms of using and collecting unique data sets. And then the third insight that I find to be perhaps the most valuable takeaway from this whole study is that there's a highly uneven landscape of data across the transportation agencies within Hillsborough County. There are a few agencies that have a very well-funded and structured data program, and we're all very data rich. We have access to many novel data sets, and we do things in a very structured, data-informed way. But at the same time, some less well-funded agencies struggle to make use of that data, either because they can't acquire it without expending a lot of staff resources. They may not be able to pay the cost to access data that's produced by a third party, and they may also lack staff capacity to do analysis in-house. So it's really incumbent upon those agencies that have well-funded programs to share data and to share insights with these less well-funded agencies, lest there be a lack of consistency. So the idea for this data platform, it was initiated through this data business plan. It finally came to fruition last November. Once again, the Hillsborough MPO is managing this project, but we're doing it in very close coordination with District 7, Hillsborough County, and City of Tampa. So we launched this shared data and analytics platform. It's been operational for about 10 months, give or take a month, and we've gotten a lot of value from it, as well as our agency partners that have access to it. I know that the district uses it quite frequently to manage its interstate and arterials and to make project adjustments based on some of the delay metrics that are available in this platform. For the type of analysis that the MPO is doing, specifically the performance measures, we've gotten a ton of value out of this. It saved us a lot of time. In the previous 2 years where we had to calculate system performance measures by hand, that one process could take anywhere from a week to 10 days. But now with this data platform that's launched, we can complete that same analysis within 30 to 60 minutes. This is some sales pitch language that was provided to me by Iteris, which is the firm that manages the ClearGuide system. I'll spare you from this because it really is commercialized, but what it describes is a web-based platform, which we have access to, that can display weather data and traffic data in real time, and we can add on different data sets. So the form that the data platform is in now is not necessarily the final form. We're continuing to explore the possibility of adding new and novel data sets to this in the future so that it can essentially become a one-stop shop for all of our mobility data across the county. We're already able to view the data in terms of history, so we have access to historical data as well as real time. That data is provided to us through an agreement that we have with FDOT Central Office. The data set that they provide is here, and it can be binned in intervals as short as 1, 5, 15, or 60 minutes. That time frame is more useful for doing operational studies, or it can be binned at longer intervals like daily, monthly, yearly, or multi-year if we're doing a planning study. Like I mentioned, this data set already contains weather and congestion-oriented data through here, but we've added a number of data sets since we launched. So now it includes Waze incident data, which is shown on this screen to the right. I'm hovering over it with my mouse. So we're able to see these 10 metrics that are provided to us by Waze users who are actually navigating the system. And we also uploaded a feed through the CDMS, which is the Crash Data Management System, so that we can see speed, delay, reliability data on top of crash and incident data to yield even more significant insights for our planning work. Some of the use cases that we've created since this launched are regarding congestion, of course. We use this tool to study route performance. So rather than looking at a single corridor and assessing what the speed, reliability, delay performance is of one long street or one long road, we identified key economic spaces through the regional demand model and created a matrix of 225 commuting routes. And then with those commuting routes, we looked at all of the performance metrics that are baked in the ClearGuide to get a sense of which commutes are the worst or most miserable. And this little use case was just for fun. I don't know if we're planning on publishing this, but the idea was to create a corollary with commuting time and delay to complement the Vision Zero work that's being done. So I'm sure that all of us are familiar with the top 20 Vision Zero corridors. We wanted to create a top 20 most miserable commutes. And so we have this data available to us. I don't know if it's going to lead to any novel insights, but this is the kind of work that could be done if we decide to implement it in a future long-range transportation plan, for example. We've also used this formally to, well, not formally, let me take that back. We're using this to consider complementing some of the traditional LOS metrics that are used in the Hillsborough County Comp Plan with more, with metrics that are more related to reliability. And so on this screen, you can see a spreadsheet of forecasted travel time index and forecasted reliability for some of the worst performing corridors that are owned by Hillsborough County. We're having discussion with county staff right now to see how we can include this in the comp plan, but this is the kind of analysis that is possible now with the data platform. I also find this tool to be very useful from a public engagement standpoint. We do a lot of a lot of public engagement, obviously. And so when we're doing a corridor study, it's not uncommon for us to go out to a church or a library and have a meeting of all stakeholders that want to attend and have questions. A lot of times when those attendees ask questions, we're not able to provide them with answers on the spot. But now with this ClearGuide platform, we may be able to provide them with greater insights as to what's going on this corridor of interest in real time, so that there's no delay and it makes for a more engaging opportunity to have those discussions. Our partners in the City of Tampa have also used this to evaluate progress on a project to retime some signals in downtown. They wanted to retime as many signals as possible, and they created routes within the platform. These gray lines that you see were created by City of Tampa staff. They looked at what the travel time and delay was on these corridors before they were retimed and after they were retimed. And this just gives us a very easy way of determining the impacts of some of this work, because as you can see, using ClearGuide for a before and after comparison, travel time on all of the corridors that were evaluated went down, and delay also went down. So that would be considered a very successful project. What you see today is just that. It's what's possible with, or it's what we have available in ClearGuide today, but we're working with our partners and with the consultants to develop a long-term roadmap for how this platform can be matured. We've made a lot of efforts to train as many agency staff as possible so that they become more familiar with it and start to utilize this tool more so than some of the older, more traditional tools that we had available to us. And we've gotten a lot of great ideas for how to expand this project. One of the first things that we want to do is to continue adding new data sets. And we're looking at things like transit data, bringing in OD possibly, expanding it out to include bike ped, demographic data, micromobility, and a host of others. The only limitation for us at this time is resources. Funding, of course, is critical or is necessary for us to bring these data sets in. And so we have to be very cautious about, or not cautious, we have to be very mindful of what data we're bringing into this so that we can produce the max value. We'd also like to build dashboards into a website so that users can have access to some of the analytics that are possible in ClearGuide. And we're going to be exploring that sometime this fiscal year. We'd like to, make this like a tool that improves transparency within the community. And longer term, we'd like to add on predictive analytics capabilities to this. The goal for us would be to make it a tool that's able to tell us what the forecasted impacts will be of certain transportation projects. So if we're looking at a city or county-owned corridor, we can see how it's performing currently, and we'd like to be able to forecast what the performance would be after doing a specific type of improvement. And we think that that's what we will be able to achieve if we continue using this tool and making it like a more accepted tool across the community of planners and operators. And I think that's it. Once again, I know most of you have seen this presentation at least once, if not more than that. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Feel free to ask me whatever you want. And if you'd like to get training on this, you haven't had it yet, feel free to reach out to me and we can work to set something up.
All right, thank you, Johnny. Any members have any questions or comments for Johnny?
Hey, Johnny. Sorry. Hey, Johnny, this is Nicole McCleary. I just wanted to say thank you for the update. Since the last time you presented, I actually got trained on this, and it's a fantastic tool. So I'm excited to see how it can be developed and used more in different ways. And I think you showed us a lot of that today. So I'm just excited for the impact that it can make. So thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Nicole.
Anyone else? Anyone else? One last time. Okay, thank you, Johnny. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Have a good one.
Hey,
All right.
Johnny, can you make Josh the presenter?
Okay, and while Johnny's doing that, our next item on the agenda is the Mpo Non-Discrimination Plan, and Josh Barber will be doing that presentation. Can't hear you, Josh.
Sorry.
There you go. Perfect.
Let me see if I can get the main screen. Can everyone see my presentation now?
Yes.
Yes.
Cool. So thank you so much for being here. Josh Barber, MPO staff for the record. Here to provide an update on our Title VI and non-discrimination plan, which I'm very excited about, and I'm looking forward to having your input. So a bit of a project background. The MPO is required to adopt a Title VI and non-discrimination plan by federal law under a Title VI program, essentially. And the program needs to be updated every 3 years. So our last one was adopted in March of 2018. So we're looking to adopt our next update to our program in 2021. So the 2018 plan covers the following kind of areas. We identify underserved communities and where they are located. We do an evaluation of how we engage those communities in our work. We review our past plans and examine how we've incorporated equity concerns into those projects or into those plans. The document or the plan also looked at our agency procedures and our processes, and then ultimately made a series of recommendations on how to improve equitable outcomes for our agency. So as part of the 2021 update, executive leadership of the MPO and the Planning Commission have decided to expand the non-discrimination plan to cover the work of the Planning Commission and the River Board, as part of our ongoing commitment to expanding equity and advancing equitable outcomes in our agency's work. So staff have been working together for the past few months to outline a scope for the 2021 plan update and identify some agency goals. So some of the goals that we've identified for the 2021 plan are to institutionalize equity as a priority throughout the MPO's work, the Planning Commission's work, and the River Board's. Improve our data tracking and performance measurement of equity conditions and outcomes. Improve community engagement, empowerment, and ultimately improve community representation throughout our agency, both staff side and with people who make decisions ultimately. So this kind of gets us into what groups are we planning for? The federal government has issued regulations and laws that kind of give us guidance in this area. So Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of '64 prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, ethnicity, color, and national origin for any programs receiving federal assistance. Similarly, the Age Discrimination Act of '75 did the same for seniors. Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act in 1974 and the American with Disabilities Act in 1990 did the same thing for persons with disabilities. The Highway Act of 1973 added sex as a protected class for any programs, once again, receiving federal assistance. And the Executive Order on Environmental Justice, issued by Clinton in 1994, covers low-income persons and minorities. And then similarly, the executive order issued on limited English proficiency in 2000 also protects persons with limited English proficiency in the provision of our programs. So this kind of gives you an idea of, who are we planning for at the end of the day throughout this plan. And to kind of give you all some context and some background on, why this is important and why we're doing this. Ultimately, the planning profession exists within a historical context. So, we have to examine the systemic and cultural discrimination and marginalization in planning, and ultimately how that shows up in our work currently. So on the left here, you can see the famous Homeowners Loan Corporation maps, the redlining maps, and kind of the legacy of those maps is shown to the right, where you see, segregated areas of Tampa that are primarily Black or low income, and just as part of the plan, trying to acknowledge the legacy of that discrimination and how that legacy manifests in our work, and trying to ensure that we're using that history to inform our current planning decisions and trying to ultimately reverse those trends. So just some more examples here. Once again, the redlining map, and to the right, you can see the eviction rates in certain neighborhoods, and you can see it's primarily concentrated in East Tampa and a little bit in the North River area. And then ultimately, some more examples, the homeownership rate gap between Black and white in Hillsborough County, air quality, transportation safety, and neighborhood safety. So how do we, how do we take the history of planning and acknowledge that, and then use that to inform our current policy decisions to have more equitable outcomes in our future? So this is kind of the approach we're taking with our 2021 plan update. Here's our scope of work we've developed. So staff have been working towards defining equity for our agency. What are the components of equity and what does an equitable outcome look like? We're also looking at the history of discrimination and planning policy in our community. So stuff like urban renewal, the Homeowners Loan Corporation and mortgage lending, the construction of the interstate highway system. So how did so many of these federal programs ultimately manifest in Hillsborough County? And what have been kind of the legacy impacts of those decisions? Task 3 is looking at community mapping. So identifying communities spatially. You can see that in our 2018 plan, and we'll be kind of taking a little bit of a new methodology with community mapping and using some more updated data. We're also looking at, what have we been doing so far in the past 3 years as an agency in advancing equitable outcomes. Sometime in February and March, we're planning on conducting public engagement, including surveys, focus groups, and other means. And then finally, kind of making some recommendations for us as an agency, both the MPO and the Planning Commission, and bringing it to you all for review and eventually adoption come summer 2021. So that's kind of the gist. We've been working with Charles Brown of Rutgers University and Equitable Cities LLC, and Danielle Jackson from TEL Public Relations, which is a local public relations firm here in Tampa, to kind of guide us through this process to ensure that we're doing everything in the correct way, that we're sensitive to community needs and community perceptions. And this is kind of going in tandem with a lot of equity work we as an agency are doing, including our diversity and inclusion training, which we did last month through this month. And you can see here kind of our project timeline with public engagement occurring in February and March and so on and so forth. So I think that's about it. I'm happy to answer any questions or get any input you would all have on this process or this plan. And I'm looking forward to it.
All right, thank you, Josh. Any questions for Josh on this subject? Anybody? Don't everybody go at once. Anybody else want to have any questions or comments? All right, you must have covered the subject well. Appreciate your presentation, Josh.
Thank you, Mike.
Next on the agenda is old business and new business. Anybody have any old or new business today?
Hey, Mike, it's Sarah here.
Sarah?
Our next meeting is scheduled for November 23rd. And as we know, as of now, the executive director on virtual meetings is not going to be extended. So if that still is the case, we're working as staff to sort of figure out how we're going to continue the committee meetings, if we want to keep them virtually for now, and then just taking no actions, just voting by consensus, or if we want to have some sort of a hybrid meeting. So like I said, it's very early conversations. Not a lot of this has been finalized or anything yet, but just keep a lookout for notices on the November 23rd meeting.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And you know, I should mention too that that is the week of Thanksgiving, so I would imagine there's going to be people that are off that week, so we may not have a quorum at our next meeting anyway.
That is true. I know we do have a TIP amendment coming up next month, but again, we can just vote by consensus if we don't have a quorum as well.
Okay. Well, I would suggest, you know, you guys figure out what we need to do legally, you know, or what we can or can't do, and just kind of advise and let us know.
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, we're trying to figure it all out. So just keep an eye on any notices from the committee.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else, Sarah?
That was all I had.
Okay. I think that's it. Appreciate everybody's time today. And we'll, I guess, see or hear from you all on November 23rd.
All right, bye, everybody.
All right.
Bye.